You're listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies. And today, my guest is Angus MacLachlan. He is the writer, producer, and director of just a wonderful, sweet film entitled A Little Prayer. Welcome to the show, Angus.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Let's tell the audience a little bit about what A Little Prayer is all about before we get started and get into a deeper discussion about the film.
Okay, well, it stars David Strathairn, who plays a man who tries to protect his daughter-in-law, played by Jane Levy, when he finds out his son is having an affair. And it also stars Anna Camp as his daughter, Celia Weston as his wife, Jane Levy, I mentioned, and Will Pullen as Jane's husband. Also, Dascha Polanco is in it.
And it's a great cast, a very great cast. I love. Uh, s- I- I've never known how to pronounce his name. Strathairn, is that how you said it?
I say Strathairn. I asked him
Yeah.
when we were shooting, and he sort of said, "Well, some people say this. My sister says this. I say that," which I understand because my last name is MacLachlan, and my brother says MacLachlan. So,
So there you go. Okay, so we can say it however we want, but I absolutely love him.
right,
So,
he's
so
fantastic.
he is. He's a wonderful actor. He truly is. Well, you touch on a lot of topics in this film. This film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival this year. What was that like for you?
Oh, it was exciting. It actually was the third film I've had at Sundance. I had a short film many years ago, and then 20 years ago, I had Junebug, which I wrote and Phil Morrison directed.
Yes, and that was the first time that Amy Adams had been nominated for an Oscar for her role in Junebug. That is a classic movie. That is one that people have on their list to watch, of their classic movies that they love. And so that's one that they do love. So it was well received. How was A Little Prayer received? What was it like going back 20 years? Well, in between you did, but coming back 20 years later and with a bigger feature than just a short film.
It was great, and everybody, they're going to move in 2 years because they say it's
Yeah.
gotten too big for Park City. But the the central tenet of Sundance is still there from when I actually worked as a volunteer at Sundance like 25 years ago,
I did
introducing
too.
films. Oh, did
I
you?
did too. Yeah, I did too. I volunteered for 7 years. I lived in Salt Lake City, and for the whole time I lived there, I volunteered. So
That's
we
great.
might have
Well,
crossed paths.
maybe so. But the it's amazing that they still feel that the people who work for Sundance really believe in independent film and really want filmmakers to succeed. That's still there, which was great to experience again.
Yeah, that's why this show was launched. Because of that, going to that film festival all those years as a volunteer planted the seed to to focus on independent and documentary filmmakers because you don't have many places that give a voice to the independent
Exactly.
documentary
And the
filmmakers.
night we premiered was Volunteer Appreciation Day. So it was great. I mean, I said I was a volunteer, so I really know how hard they work.
How perfect. How perfect. Well, I'm hoping to go back in this January because it's the last time it will be in Park City. It's this January. Then it goes to Boulder, which out of all of the choices that they were making, that decision about Boulder was my number one choice. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it's like in Boulder too. Similar. I've never been to Boulder, but it sounds like it might be a similar kind of venue
Mhm.
as long as they keep that Sundance energy up,
Yeah,
which I
I'm
know they
sure they
will.
will.
I'm sure they will. Well, let's go. How did you wrote this film? And so let's talk a little bit about the genesis of this movie and why you chose this topic, and how it developed and how it came about.
Well, it's taken me 9 years to make this film from when
Years,
I first got
okay.
the idea. And, I write very unconsciously. I mean, I get ideas, of course, from things I read, things I experience, things I dream, things I, observe, other films, whatever. All of life is sort of thrown in together and I start making notes. And then I often have found the experience that I understand what I'm writing about in retrospect. And so I started this film when my daughter was 15. Now she's 24.
Oh dear.
And I realized I was writing about her growing up and how you have to eventually let your children grow up and go. And you still want to protect them and you still want to tell them what to do, and you can't. And just that feeling is really one of the central emotional centers of A Little Prayer.
It is. The relationship between David Strathairn's character and Jane Levy, it's his daughter-in-law, and so he has a daughter, he has a son, but he's really bonded with his daughter-in-law. Let's talk a little bit about that, and why you chose that rather than his own daughter.
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting and often happens sometimes in families where um, even I see it in Junebug, and again, it's not something I consciously decide, but you see, like when Amy Adams' character has lost her baby in the hospital, it's not her husband who's there; it's her brother-in-law, and you see the new daughter-in-law talking to her father-in-law on the porch later and being upset. So I think it's interesting and intriguing to me how sometimes that works in a family, and in A Little Prayer David's character and Jane's character are more similar than David is with his actual children. Not that he doesn't love his children, but they just are, as she says in it, kindred spirits.
Yes, they are kindred spirits. As again, you touched on a lot of things in this. You touch on PTSD, fidelity, a woman's right to choose. Those are big topics that you have put in this little film, a little
Yeah.
prayer. We need a little prayer after all of going through all of those topics. So tell me how you interwove them and why you did choose all of those topics for this film.
Well, again, it's first to just tell a story, but I really believe that these kind of hot button topics are very different being argued on the floor of the Senate to when it happens to someone that you love.
Right.
And that is what's intriguing to me. And also, I don't think of myself as a political filmmaker, but you can extrapolate these issues as being politically charged. And yet, when you really love someone and something happens to them that might be against what your beliefs are, um, you have to deal with it. You have to face it in a way that you can't just say me, us, and them,
Right.
the other. So that's intriguing to me.
Yeah, and it's intriguing in the way that you interwove it all together too, and throughout all these unique characters that you've created. The scene when Jane Levy's character decides, to end a pregnancy is very poignant, and how that decision affects the family. Can we go into that a little bit more detail?
Yeah, it's an incredibly, what I want to express is how hard that decision is for anyone. And actually, the day we shot it was the day that the Dobbs decision was handed down. We had set things up, and and one of my PAs, Eliza Klein, came and said, "Have you heard this?" And it just like, I mean, you can imagine what it did to everyone, but particularly the women in the cast and on the crew, how emotional and powerful it was, and to what that's going to mean. And so I wanted to show how it's not an easy decision and everybody has a different perspective. And I imagine perhaps that David Strathairn's character might not think that that's a good idea, but because he loves this woman, his daughter-in-law, so much, he has to find a way to deal with it. And he says, people these days, they're just too much for me, but he can't cut her off.
Right.
And that's what's important.
And he he obviously he knew why she decided to do that. I mean, he was more privy to what was going on with her husband, perhaps than she was, or at least he didn't know how much she did know. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, we talk about fidelity in this, so her husband has strayed, so that contributed to it. But I think she also knew she just couldn't stay in this marriage any longer.
Right. And, her husband is a Afghanistan war veteran. and clearly is dealing with something very deep from that. And he's starting to drink again and starting to do these things that are not like him. His father says, "Where did this come from?" But I thought it was interesting because David Strathairn's character is a Vietnam War vet. And so he clearly would have known other men and women who had suffered from this. So he can't again blame his son. He knows his son needs help. So again, it's that hook that's so intriguing when you can't, you know, just cut people off. You have to open your heart in some way.
Right, right. And he does. He's such a kind, caring man. And you can see how he's suffering inside, watching his children, his daughter too. Her marriage is dissolving. And I don't think they really, although that husband never shows up in this film, he's a character in the film, and very much so. And, I, I I don't think they are really happy with the choice she made to marry him to begin with, but now she's with him, and then what she chooses to do again after she's come to live with him. And here he is, he has two children that are deeply troubled and going through some very troubling times in their lives. And yet and his daughter-in-law also. So you've got these three younger people who are just, really starting out in their lives, truthfully, what are their 30s and 30s, about that age category, somewhere in there. And, that's still a big beginning of people's lives. Lots happens during your 30s in life, and 40s and 50s and 60s, keeps going on. But that, he's suffering with them. He's so empathetic towards all of them, and you can see the pain and the struggle that he's going throughout this. I mean, it's a wonderful acting. He's always great. I mean, David Strathairn is always fabulous, and he really internalizes, and you feel his pain as he watches his children and his daughter-in-law all suffering at the same time. How difficult was it for you as the director to get that kind of performance from him?
Oh, it wasn't difficult at all. He's amazing, and everything that you imagine David Strathairn being, he is. He is such a mensch. He's such an upstanding person, and I needed an actor in that role that you felt that. You felt this is a man of gravitas and compassion in a way, and yet he's a conservative man. The character is not David, and I think back. There are very few. We had one day of rehearsal when we had the actors
Wow.
together, and yet these actors had to try to make the illusion that they are they've known them their whole lives. Um, and they all played together and connected so strongly. And Jane Levy has said that David's probably the kindest actor she's worked with, and so she said it wasn't hard for her to open up her heart for him in scenes. And there's a very moving scene at the end where she does
Right.
that. And he as well had this thing that I've now directed three films and I've never really seen it, where the scene where he goes and confronts the woman that his son is having the affair with, Narcidalia, played by Dascha Polanco. And we shot it and I watched it and he was great. But then when I later just looked at the footage, I saw all these things and thoughts and emotions going on within him that I couldn't see in the same space. The camera picked it up, which is what they say is real movie star stuff. And
Mm.
he's got it.
Wow, that's beautiful. I guess it's because you're just totally in the moment when you're filming it, and you're just being present to what's going on. And then you don't realize everything that's going on. That's what's the wonderful thing about film, that we can go back and look at it later and see the things that we didn't see in the moment. So what
Right.
beautiful, how beautiful. Jane Levy is wonderful in this too. Let's talk a little bit about her and her character and her performance in this.
Yeah, I have to say that I worked with a really wonderful casting agent, Mark Bennett, and he actually is the person who brought Amy Adams to us when we were making Junebug, and he brought Jane Levy. And I was an actor for a long time, so I don't really believe in auditioning actors. If I've seen their work, I don't have to have them prove that they can act. But I usually, will send a script to them, and then if they're interested, I'll talk to them and talk about the character. And if I feel like it works, then that would be, and they agree, that's great. So I cast her, and then later, Mark sent me some footage of her television show she had on NBC called Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, and I went, "Oh my God, she's so talented!" Because in that she sings and dances and is physically funny. And I said, "What?" It's like the complete opposite of buyer's remorse. She's just so much. But I needed an actress in that role who had a deep inner life because she doesn't speak much.
Right.
And Jane has spoken about how the character has one face for everybody else and then one very private face. And um, and she has that ability. And there's lots of scenes of just her by herself, kind of going through her life and thinking about things. And she was able to bring all of that, all those colors. And in that one scene, you're talking about that the camera goes around her like almost 360 degrees, and it's a one take, one shot, three,
Mm.
like probably about 3 minutes. And she goes through so many emotions and thoughts and feelings, and goes gets upset and then pulls herself back together. It's an amazing feat of acting.
Hmm. It really is. It truly is. You've got another actress that has you was in Junebug, Cecilia Weston, and you see her in lots of things, and I never really knew her name, but I've been watching the series on Netflix, Luann,
Right.
and which I'm loving, and she's in that. And then when I saw this movie with her, I was like, okay, I've got to make sure I always remember her name going forward because she's one of those character actresses that has been around forever. It seems like, and yet again, you don't always know the names of these wonderful characters that we've seen in so many wonderful movies. So, I tell us a little about Cecilia and how she came to this project.
Well, yeah, Celia's actually been in, she was in Junebug. She was in my film that I directed, Goodbye to All That. So this is the third film that she's done. I'm such a fan of her. She actually was the first person we cast in Junebug. I had known her work, and Phil Morrison, who directed it, and I went, "Do you think we could maybe get Celia Weston to play the mother?" And then when she said yes, we were thrilled. And the thing that Celia has is that she has this incredible emotional verisimilitude and then can turn a line on a dime that makes it comedic. And that's the way I see life. Life is like that. And she gets my material, and she's a dream. And it's wonderful that she really has a wonderful character in this woman who sort of she kind of really knows what everything is going on, but she also has a kind of a slightly airy quality to her. It's a terrific performance.
It is, and she and David play well together. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's talk about that relationship.
Yes, this is a couple that have been married for forever. And it was interesting. I mean, they had to develop something that looked like this is an old married couple. Um, and they did a thing which wasn't in the script, which I loved, just in terms of actors giving something. Every time David's character leaves for the morning or whatever, he would reach over and just touch her and say, like, "Bye, sweetheart." And she'd touch his hand and say, "Bye." And you just, in that little behavior, you saw something that they probably have always done this, that that love is still there. And yet they have their problems. You get a sense of their past, history has been not completely smooth, and how they have different ideas of how to treat, particularly their daughter, who played by Anna Camp. What would help her. He wants to maybe give her some money for something, and she says, "You know what she's going to do with it." And we never hear that, but you just in that little bit, they've gone through this over and over and over again.
Yeah, it was great the way you filmed that too, that scene. So, Anna Camp, you brought her up. She was next on my list. Let's talk about Anna Camp because she's also been in some of your other films too, and her
Right.
character. Let's go into because we didn't talk too much about. We've touched on her a little bit in her character, but we didn't do a deeper dive.
Yeah, I love, she really, really enjoyed playing the character. And the character is kind of a mess, but also kind of heroic. Like you feel like everything's like messed up in her life, but nothing's going to get her down. She's going to keep going. And you get the same feeling with her daughter. There's a lot of messing things, but her daughter also has this spark that's not going to be crushed. And Anna, Anna and Celia Weston and Steve Coulter, who plays the soldier who talks to David Strathairn at the funeral. All three of them, we all went to the same school, not at the same time, the North Carolina School of the Arts. We were all acting students. So Anna, I knew from that, and she was in Goodbye to All That. And she again has this comedic aspect to her, and true. I mean, she's from South Carolina, so she knows this woman. And I would say, Anna, I think this character might have like fingernail polish, but it's almost all like chipped off. And she was like, that's great. And also said, I said to her, I think she drives barefoot. So she was like, I see that woman. I know that person. So she lapped it up.
I know, and she does it. She does a great job with it too. And the woman, the young actress who plays her daughter, let's because she's very good in this. How old was she when you filmed this?
She was 5 years old. Yeah, she is
Wow.
really, she really can act. With working with a child, it helped that I am a father. So, but and I had a child in my film Goodbye to All That, and so I kept talking to the little girl Hadley, and I realized I felt like I wasn't quite connecting to her, and then I realized we shot it during COVID, during the height of COVID in June of 2022. So we were all wearing masks. The actors weren't. And I realized when I was talking to her that she wasn't seeing my face when I would smile. She was only seeing my eyes. So I would take off my mask to try to make a connection. But, she really, I would tell her things and she could act. I mean, she could understand a certain emotional thing that was going on. And I really, because I think even though she only says no twice, that's all, those are her only lines, but you get the feeling that there's a real person there.
Oh, yes, because even though she maybe only saying no twice in the film, she does many other things in the film
Yes. Yeah.
that are, and you feel like she's talking just by her body movement and by what she's
Right.
doing. So it's,
Right. Right.
but that's amazing. I think young people, youngsters, young children can take it all in and absorb it in a different way because they're learning everything at that point in time. So, how did you find her?
She is from Atlanta, and we had Mark Bennett in LA, and then we had a casting company in Charlotte, Mitzi Corrigan's casting company. And so she brought some of the smaller roles. She brought Hadley. She brought the man who's the veteran at the VFW who talks. A lot of people think he's actually a Vietnam veteran, but he's not. She brought me the woman at the Planned Parenthood, the who has this beautiful face and expresses so much in one little shot, really. So yeah, I was very fortunate.
You were very fortunate for that. And let's not forget to talk about the son in this.
Yes.
What's the actor's name again? Um,
Will Pullen, yes,
Will
Mark
Pullen.
Bennett brought him as well, and he was so enthusiastic because it took a while to get the whole thing together. But he would always write and say, "I'm reading these books on, PTSD and soldiers," and he would go to, talk to them. And I said, "What's challenging about his role is that he's got to be a charming person who then you hear revealed has done things that are not so charming."
Right.
But he's one of these people that most people think is a great, great guy, which is why it's so shocking to his father to find out, he's done some sort of very dark things, and that was just and so Will had that aspect to him. Like I imagine in the family, he was sort of the golden boy, and his sister was sort of the screw up, and they've always played that, and now his things are kind of changing, and he's going through difficult times himself.
Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful, wonderful film and great character studies. Families go through all of this. Many families are going through experience it all now. So it's a wonderful little film, A Little Prayer. Where can people see A Little Prayer?
Well, we actually open August 29th in New York and LA and Chicago, and I think actually 74 other cities. So if one is interested, they can go to the Music Box Films website and they list, I think there's now like 81 cities that it's going to be shown in, and it will roll out a little bit more as if people, come see it.
That's great. Well, I wish you much success with a little prayer, and I appreciate you being on the show today, Angus. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you.